Rebecca Nichols, Associate Dean, Workforce Development and Community Partnerships, a big title, at Niagara College. And of course, as many of you know, if you live here in the Niagara region, one of Niagara College's campuses is right across the road from us right here at White Oaks. So over to Lise and Rebecca.
Awesome. Thanks, Vivian, and thanks for having me. It's been a great day so far, so hopefully this is an equally great session with some good discussion. As Vivian mentioned, she mentioned ExcelerateHR Services. That's just my own independent consulting business. Largely, I spent 20 years as an HR leader in various private organizations. And now the fun thing I've been doing over the last 5 years is being able to go into different organizations in various sectors and helping them with their talent strategies. And so I say that to give you context that I'm here representing employers. And so I can throw employers under the bus in this case and talk a little bit about that. In terms of the skills gap, I would say, I want to make one comment, and this is where I throw employers under the bus, is that you know, I'm not seeing one specific thing, but what I am seeing fairly consistently, and of course this is my own sample group, right, is that some employers are still not getting it, right? They still think they can post that job, interview various candidates, and they're supposed to come in ready to fulfill all the duties of the job, and then they're baffled when their credentials don't line up with what the needs of the organization are. It's not all bad, though. Many have come to terms with the fact that they do need to invest in their people, and they do need to address this gap on their own. So Rebecca and I are here to kind of share some good news stories and some innovative things we've seen with various employers. And I want to hone in on one employer that I've worked with over the last couple years. And they were really, really lucky from the perspective that they were on the precipice of significant growth, construction, industrial type of environment. So they were dealing with two different things. They were dealing with the labor shortage, as we all know, in skilled trades, but they were also dealing with an upskilling issue because there was a lot of new technology and a lot of different work that they were trying to go after, and their workforce simply wasn't ready for it. And so they went through the process, and long story short, they ended up on the right side of receiving some skills development funds. And what that resulted in was really them having to come up with a plan around how are we going to address all these gaps so we can make the best use of these funds. And so I want to, you know, we ended up with 8 projects, and I was there to help lead some of these projects or support some of these projects. 8 high-level projects, I think, with sub-projects, there was about 24. But I thought 3 were very interesting, and I thought I'd share some of those today. The first one, I'll say, was specifically to support one of the underrepresented groups. And if you're familiar with skills development funds, they love to hear that, and certainly that was a big issue for this employer. So this one was specifically to support women in largely, as I said, it was a construction industrial environment. So to give you some perspective, when I joined, they probably had about 120 employees. Less than 3% of the workforce was female, and that includes the office positions. So not very much happening on the production side for women in terms of skilled trades or unskilled labor. And so the introduction of this program was really to support women in the workplace, and as we grew and hired more women, to make sure that they were being supported in this type of environment, because it can be very intimidating, you know, working as a mechanic alongside, you know, 30 men. And so the program was actually aptly named the Rise Together program. And essentially all the females in the workplace were invited to participate. And I think we had about 100% uptake on it. Everyone wanted to be part of this. And so what we did is we said, okay, well, we want to make this a safe space for women. And so no men ever invited to any of these sessions. And what we did is we actually hired a corporate coach, and she's the one who facilitated all of these meetings. So they met on a biweekly basis, and she facilitated, and it was very structured. So the intent wasn't just, a gab session every 2 weeks. It was really about how can we learn and grow and support one another in a workplace that's largely male-dominated. And it was extremely successful, and it was, obviously we looked at some metrics, but I would say some of the softer pieces to that was, one, we created that safe space for discussion and support, right? So now we had unskilled laborers interacting with management folks, and one of the key rules was you checked your position at the door. So it wasn't about your position in the organization. It was really about how can we support each other to be successful in this environment. It was very much confidential, so Vegas rules applied across the board. And I gotta tell you, they stuck to it. I did not participate in this group, and no one ever shared anything, even though I tried to hint. Nothing was shared. Although what came of it, though, people would share. And we ended up at the end of the year growing to about 200 employees. And by that time, the workforce had changed a little bit. 10% of the workforce was now female. So it was huge strides, and it wasn't just office folks. We had women in skilled trades, in the unskilled positions, and so it was fantastic to see. But what I heard from many of them was, I don't know that I would have made it through to the end of the year had it not been for this support group. And that to me was the biggest success in this. But in terms of some hard facts, in terms of metrics, I think a couple interesting things happened as well. We had some unskilled laborers in that group, and they wanted to do more in their careers, and they didn't really have the opportunities or the confidence. And by the end of the 12 months, they had actually applied and were successful in becoming apprentices with the organization. So double bonus. We hired some apprentices. They were female. And we also had one woman who was working in inventory and procurement. And she was doing some really good work. She was supporting the manager. Manager went off sick. So she had stepped up and done some additional things. And she really wasn't being recognized by her manager. And through that group, she said, she found the confidence and courage to approach her manager and say, hey, I'm doing these things. I'm learning. I'm wanting to do more. And she was able to get a promotion and a salary increase. And so she attributes that to the confidence she built through that program. So I thought that was a really cool one to share, because I believe they're still actually continuing with those sessions, but I think all those elements really made it a success. So that to me was one of my favorites. The other one actually I wanted to talk about was a program that we decided, I mentioned construction industrial. It wasn't a sexy business. People say, oh, I want to be a nurse, I want to be a firefighter, all these things. No one says they want to go into this line of work. And so exposure for this employer is really important. So we decided, we want to introduce people to this sector, but also have some sort of feeding ground for new recruits. And so what we did is we actually engaged with Niagara College, Mohawk College, and we also have some operations in Thunder Bay, and engaged Confederation College. And we started brainstorming on how we could do this. And in the end, what we ended up doing is we offered a certificate program. So to the point that was being made, sometimes the colleges are a little slow to get a program through. Well, we learned that the hard way, because we're just employers approaching them. We think these things can happen quickly, and it couldn't. So we went the certificate program route, and what we decided to do was an introduction to a trade, and along with the quality assurance aspect of that, the health and safety aspect to that, and kind of the tools and techniques, all really centered around the nature of this particular business. So it was very, very specific to this business. And we offered it to current employees, so unskilled laborers, and we offered it to new hires. Anyone who was willing to go through the process and was selected for an unskilled labor position and was willing to pursue the certificate program and make the time commitment. And the outcome of that was really interesting. Tons of learnings, things I would do differently, things I would do the same. But what came of that, we had 8 people, I believe, go through the Hamilton program. And at the end of that, what we found is folks were able to transition. We actually, 2 of the 8 actually were signed up as apprentices following that program, so huge success there. They became welding apprentices. And the other 6, you'll say, well, 2 out of 8 isn't great. Well, the goal really wasn't apprenticeships, but really to upskill the workforce. The other 6, what they did is they went from unskilled laborers to skilled laborers. So the difference in that environment was you're doing general labor work versus now as a skilled laborer, you were actually assigned with a trades crew and doing work more specific to that trade. So they were now experiencing a lot more of that trade and some of the work that is done there. And so the whole group really advanced their careers with that organization through this program. I'd be remiss if I don't talk about budget, because I come from private sector, and that's number one question employers are all going to ask you. That, of course, was a program we supported through those SDF funds. It was privately developed, a little more costly. But when you think about training dollars organizations spend, the reality is sometimes you want to make do and take a blanket approach to training. And I think a really critical learning through this is that you're better off focusing your dollars to make sure that you're upskilling the right groups of individuals rather than trying to spread those dollars and really not getting the outcomes you're looking for. So that was an important piece. The last example I'll share is not innovative at all. And the reason I chose to share it is because we had to pivot on what we were thinking. So in that environment, we did have several newcomers in the group. And, we all know newcomers face a lot of challenges in terms of credentialing, and certainly language is a barrier. And so, as one of the projects, we thought, we really want to support newcomers. What we're going to do is, we're going to approach them, we're going to encourage them to take some ESL training, and we're going to pay for that training, and so they don't have to worry about costs and that sort of thing. And we had 0% uptake on that. And so we regrouped, and you sit back and you reflect and you think, these folks are working 45 hours a week. Some of them are underemployed, and they might be doing other things to make ends meet. And others had families, and after working 45 hours, who wants to go and drive to a classroom and, do more? So we had to pivot, and we thought, we know we have some really good people here, and language is the barrier, and we want to support them. And so we did pivot, and we came back, and we said, okay, we have a new idea. If we were to pay for your training, and if we were to give you time, on company time, here at the site, and bring the instructor here, would you engage? And we had 100% uptake. So that was the difference. The difference was bringing it to them and making that happen. And, again, think about cost. Reality is, an instructor for a year to meet them bi-weekly, that was under $5,000. It wasn't a big, big expense. The productivity lost, it was about a group of 10. The productivity loss, yeah, that's there. But what we did is we worked with the operations group, and we talked about things like, okay, when is your least productive time? When would be a good time to pull these individuals out of their respective departments? And we landed on a day and time that worked. We set some ground rules because we said, well, you can't pull them out at any time, only in emergency, and then we had to define emergency for them, because otherwise everything's an emergency. But it was really successful, and the cool part about it was, not only did they engage, but you know, when you value a group of employees like that, you know, so you think about it, and it's about learning a different language, great, but it really spoke to how much we valued them in the organization, that we would make that shift to make sure that they could participate and they could learn and grow. And the cool thing was, we had one fellow who had an engineering background, super, super bright guy. Language was a barrier, but such a hard worker. And the really cool thing was, and coincidentally, but this helped a lot, at the end of that year, he was actually promoted into an engineering management position. And so, you know, great success story. Peers kind of worked with him for 12 months, and to see him kind of succeed like that was great. And like I said, it wasn't a huge expense for the organization. But I think through these examples, some more costly than others, if we can just kind of turn some of these ideas on their head and just, you know, they're not cookie cutter, they're very specific to this organization and they worked for us. But if you could take one tidbit out of each of those and see how they might work in different organizations, and I'll go back to the comment, employers have to kind of change the way they think around this. And, you know, I do want to make one last plug for apprenticeships, because this was a great example of an employer who, and you've heard it before, you know, if we invest in apprentices, you know, what if they leave? Well, my response is, anyone can leave at any time, any day. And the reality is, you know, there's no one to steal from anymore. Everyone has been stealing from each other, and we're not solving the problem. And so in this case, the Skills Development Fund was the impetus for this employer to make the change. They had never had an apprenticeship program. And, you know, probably why I don't do work from them anymore. I was on them all the time about hiring apprentices. But what that forced them to do was look at the value, and it also gave them a target. And so we went from 0 apprentices there, and in that 12-month period had set a target for 20 apprentices. And when that application got approved, no one believed that they would hire 20 apprentices. We hired 20 apprentices and registered them. They were all in different trades. And what we did is we actually created an internal company campaign. Because we said, well, we don't want to go on the street and hire apprentices. We want to offer it to our current employee base as well. And I believe 16 of the apprentices registered were internal unskilled laborers. And so, you know, you think of it myopically and say, well, it's an apprenticeship program. The reality is, if you were an unskilled laborer in that organization, you had nowhere to go. There was no apprenticeship program. So if you wanted to do something different and, you know, upgrade, you had to leave that organization. So when I looked at their unskilled laborers, their turnover rate was well over 30%. And suddenly we introduced an apprenticeship program, and guess what? We've created a career path. And so that's where the majority of those apprentices came from. And, you know, I'm happy to say after 12 months, I think 16 of them remained. And there's a new commitment to hiring 10 more apprentices in 2024. So thanks very much for letting me share, and I'll pass it on to Rebecca.
Thank you so much, Lise. That was excellent. So hello, everyone. My husband tells me I have a really nasally voice when I talk into a microphone, so I'm sorry that you have to listen to this for the next 20 minutes. I can't change it, unfortunately. So today I'm representing the college sector. As Viv mentioned in the intro, I work at Niagara College, and I'm going to do my best to not throw the college sector under the bus. But if anyone asks, post-session, it was Mike from Bow Valley College who said the following: colleges are not the most agile and innovative. We tend to be very reactive, unfortunately, to circumstances in the labor market. And Mike, again, you set the foundation for me earlier when you said it takes years for a program to get started, to be approved, to see the outcomes. But I'm going to prove that wrong just a little bit today, and with a couple of examples of ways that we've been able to work with our community partners to address some really challenging labor market issues in a really innovative way. And so that's what I'll chat about for the next few minutes, and then really post this fireside chat. It's an opportunity for you folks to discuss at your tables, solutions that you could see moving forward based on these kind of ideas that we're pitching. So I'm going to start by also addressing the Skills Development Fund, which Lise spoke about a couple of times. And for those who don't know, that's an initiative funded by the Ministry of Labor, Immigration, Training, Skills Development. I think I got the letters in the right order there, but they change names pretty often. And it's essentially a fund that's meant to help build resilient workforces and address labor market challenges in really unique and innovative ways. That's pretty much word for word from the guidelines. And so as colleges, while we haven't been able to apply for that funding directly, we've been able to act as project partners in some really cool initiatives. And so I'll talk about two specifically, and then I'm going to shift focus a little bit into some of the access initiatives that colleges do offer that really help to build our future workforce. So I'll start with a partnership that we launched in 2022 with the Home Builder Association, and it was really meant to act as a try-a-trade program. And that's not really the most innovative idea, I'm sure you're thinking. That's been tried and tested before, but it works. There are some really cool outcomes that we're seeing from that program. So it's meant, of course, to address, if you think of the partner, burning issues in the construction sector. We hear about it all the time. You all hear about it as workforce development experts. There is a huge housing crisis, locally, regionally, provincially. How do we train workers, not just in skilled trades positions, which of course we see a shortage, but what about general laborers and kind of the quote unquote grunt workers, right? I know Kelly is doing some really cool stuff at the Y on that, so you might want to chat with him too. So what we launched in partnership with industry, really focusing our attention on creating programming that the sector needs and wants, that employers need and want. So we built a try-a-trade program, and we focused specifically on two pathways, roofing and drywall, for our first iteration. We had over 300 applicants reach out to us, express interest. And unfortunately, we couldn't accept everyone. Funding was limited. But our first cohort saw 80 participants join, and we had a 70% success rate in finding employment in industry. And so a relatively fast-paced program. It was 12 weeks in duration. It had a work placement component that was incredibly important to the sector, that they could, apply the skills that they were learning in the classroom. We focused on health and safety, of course, proper tool use, and we really focused from a participant lens on those who are unemployed and underemployed, and specifically in underrepresented groups. So we supported a number of newcomers, a lot of women, huge interest from women, which was awesome, to your point. And really, we saw some excellent success in that program. We have now applied for subsequent rounds of funding, and we have, in our second iteration, focused on framing and insulation. So now we are, again, addressing a relatively unique skill set, particularly the insulation piece, that really training programs didn't really cover. And so in that cohort, we served 100 students. We increased our capacity. and about a 65% success rate on that program. So some positives for sure we saw. Our local construction association was appreciative of the efforts and could see the return on the investment, but we had some hiccups too. We had some serious challenges. Preaching to the choir here, but everyone really knows transportation's a struggle here, and so how do we address that need? When you have homes being built in areas where transit doesn't exist, how are these people getting to work? And so we did a lot of ride sharing. Some of the employers pooled together their resources and focused on ride sharing programs, which was of benefit. But how do we address some of those issues collectively, right? And I think that could be something that you discuss in your groups. We're seeing, of course, some improvement in that direction with Niagara Regional Transit, but we're just not quite there. Right? And then how do we address further upskilling needs in the construction industry? So we are now pivoting our next round of skills development funding with this employer to focus on upskilling workers who are already in the construction sector. How do we take them to the next level, whether that's through a pre-apprenticeship, an apprenticeship. So we're working on that with that particular partner. So not the most innovative idea, gotta be square, but it's working, and we're seeing the success in that project. The second program I wanted to chat about is one I'm personally just a huge advocate for. And it's with a partner who's here today facilitating another session. And it's really meant to address, again, a critical need in Niagara, all over the province, childcare, shortage of childcare spaces. So we put our creative hats on, again, with industry, and we talked about how we could increase the number of registered early childhood educators in Niagara in a different way. At the college, of course, we offer the 2-year early childhood education diploma program, but that's a 2-year commitment. And so how do we get more people in the field to open up more childcare spaces? We have a number of childcare assistants in Niagara, huge number, of course, to support the registered ECEs. And so we thought, is there a way that we could upskill those folks while they're still working, full or part-time, and open up that pathway to become an RECE in an accelerated way? And so we did just that. In 2022, we launched an 11-month registered early childhood education diploma for workers currently in the childcare sector, employed in a childcare assistant role, with a minimum of 250 hours of employment. And we taught them online asynchronously. So no live lectures. They could work at their own pace to complete the diploma. It was ambitious and very rigorous. And the 90 participants who joined the program will tell you it was 11 months of torture. They were working full-time in their field. They were studying full-time. They were taking care of families or other obligations, trying to have a personal life. None of that for 11 months. It was rigorous. It was intense. We had a 90% graduation rate, yay, which translates to 70 participants graduating, which opened up, wait for it, like 900 childcare spaces in Niagara. Like that's the impact. It was truly, probably in my 16-year career at Niagara College, the best project I've ever worked on. The impact in community was massive. And so we are pursuing a 4th round of Skills Development Fund. Hope to get it, fingers crossed, November 17th. We plan to train 50 participants, which will open up an additional 750 childcare spaces for all ages, which is so cool. In case you haven't heard, we're about 8,000 spaces short in Niagara. Workforce Collective plug, they did that report. So we have lots of work to do lots of work to do to get the sector where it needs to be. But that's just one way of making a difference in bridging that gap. And of course, we need other partners to come to the table with ideas. We need government to step up and recognize the important work that these people do in community, and recognize that through a wage to retain those workers to stay in the industry. So that is one of the most special programs. So please cross your fingers that we get that again with our partner, and we could make a difference in the lives of Niagara families like yourselves. So kind of the third area I'll chat about is access to post-secondary for what we call non-traditional learners. So if you're in the education space, you know there's individuals who come to post-secondary direct from high school. And then there's this other market, aside from international. I'm not going to focus on international students right now, but from a domestic lens, people who come from a pathway outside of direct from secondary school. And we call those non-traditional learners. They're coming from a very different segment. Perhaps they're older workers looking to get back into education and upskilling. Perhaps they're disengaged from education. They've left secondary school for a variety of reasons. Maybe they didn't even think of college as even an option for them. So we've developed some really unique access programs at the college that I want to just touch on really briefly. And one of them is with the organization that was spoken about this morning. Jason was on the panel, NAPAM, focused on supporting Indigenous youth access post-secondary. And what we developed is a really beautiful project and certificate program that blends academic learning and cultural learning together. And for Indigenous students, coming to post-secondary may not be a reality that they thought of for themselves for a variety of reasons. And so we've made that transition. Our hope was to make that transition as smooth as possible, integrating cultural elements, weaving that with academics, and we created this beautiful initiative called Empower, which stands for My Path of Worthwhile Educational Re-engagement. We had our first cohort in 2022. Gosh, that was a busy year for me. I wonder why. And we had 25 students participate from our local Indigenous partners. And of those 25 students, we had, wait for it, 11 transitioned to post-secondary programs, half at Niagara College and then half elsewhere. So we saw a really good uptake from the Indigenous community, a lot of interest. And now those folks are on a pathway to success in their lives that will eventually, a couple years from now, translate to the future workforce. Right? And so we wanted to highlight that initiative as a way of bringing forth innovative solutions to support our workforce challenges now and in the near future. And then I'll just touch on a couple of other pieces. So of course, most colleges have newcomer programs, programs with our high school boards local that support high school students who are disengaged from academics, and how do we re-engage them. So we have those offerings available. We deliver pre-apprenticeship programs and apprenticeship programs that Lise spoke about, all in the name of getting people prepared for the workforce. So in terms of what we wanted to where I wanted to land and how I wanted this message to land was, and Mike kind of stole the words earlier from me. Mike, come on. We want to work with you. Colleges are very committed to being part of the solution to address workforce challenges. We know we can't do it on our own. We need your support. So please engage with us in whatever capacity, even if it's just a small idea that you want to take and get some input in, some collaboration. We're here to work together with you on that. I'm going to pick on Dr. Topo there in the audience. She is someone that I collaborate often with, and she's doing some incredible work for Black female youth in Niagara. And there are some amazing initiatives that we're hoping to partner on. Some things we've tried to do and haven't received the funding, but know that we're open to the idea to chat about innovative ways that we can address these challenges. So from a call to action standpoint for each of you is reach out to the college in your community. Start those discussions. At Niagara, that's me, so call me. Would love to work together, would love to figure out solutions that invest in people, invest in your organizations, and address those challenges. And know that everything we would do together is customized. So just building on Lise's point, it's not a cookie cutter approach. It's very individualized. What are your workforce challenge needs that we can help you address? And focus your attention on those underrepresented groups. They have so much to contribute to the workforce and just need an opportunity. So that's another kind of call to action that we wanted to leave you with. So it's 1:15. I think we're sort of in the right timing space for discussion at groups. Pass it over to Viv.